So a friend invited me to go to Titanite Hill, so here I am. I haven't been here for a couple of years now. I think it's been 2 years since I've last been here. So last year there was some logging that happened and they cleared out this section, and then I'll show you the section behind me that they cleared out as well. But apparently in the section behind me you can find some interesting mica once in a while. So here's the section behind me. As you can see, the logs have been piled up. This logging happened last year, I believe, and they cleared out this area, and I think some of this ridge line, you can kind of see it, has mica in it. So if you're interested in that kind of thing and you're down at Titanite Hill, check out this back part in the parking area. They actually made the parking area bigger. It used to be that you could only fit like maybe 2 vehicles. Now you can definitely easily fit like 4 or 5 if you pack it tightly, so that's nice. But yeah, you can see this area got cleared out as well. I'm just walking the pathway up to the occurrence, but I thought I'd show you the trilliums that are along the way. I think they're starting to peter off now, but they're still in nice bloom. You can see the nice trilliums that are along the pathway, which is kind of cool. But yeah, sometimes you'll, depending on the time of year, you'll see some interesting plants and stuff. So that's another thing to keep an eye out. But you can see the pathway. It's actually been, this whole area has kind of been cleared out a lot, which is nice. And there's a much more obvious path up to the Gibson Road Occurrence, or Titanite Hill, as other people call it. So I'm up at my old spot that I always check out with the Titanites and stuff, and you can see, brought my friend up here too, and we got some cool stuff. Found this lower down, nicest piece of Richterite I found. It's a 2 little double terminated Richterites on top of each other, a nice little thumbnail specimen. And then, you know, you got your Titanites. This is probably the nicest one. Looks like it's probably 99% there. It's got good shape to it. And there's some other stuff. Like there's a couple of feldspars and stuff. Like this one looks like it'll be good. It's got 2 little Titanites perched on it. This is a... Whoop, rolls down the hill. That's not good. Gotta be careful. Don't lose your stuff. This is a large Richterite crystal, or hornblende, or whatever you want to call it, amphibole, yada yada yada. But it's got some nice little Titanites on it too. So hopefully when that one's cleaned up, it'll actually look half decent with those Titanites on there. And you know, there's other stuff. There's like some mix of hornblende, like Richterite, amphibole, and like feldspars and stuff. So hopefully, yeah, we find some big ones here. That would be cool. If we do, I'll show you guys, because, you know, large Titanites are what we're going for. And just to show you, this is the crevice we're working in. The first year I was up here collecting, it was literally this section with this little crevice, and it was, I think the grass was up to there, and I was just digging in that hole with my whole arm down in the hole and just pulling out whatever I could find. Then the next year I came, probably where that root bulb is where the grass went up to, and now it's even higher. But we're still finding Titanites, just small ones and broken ones, but hopefully one of us will find a big one. If that does occur, I'll make sure to show you guys. Also, if you're coming up this time of year, like May, June-ish, the bugs are pretty bad. So, you know, bring lots of bug spray, or just have thick skin. Either one works. But I'm gonna get back to digging and hopefully find some cool stuff. So I moved from the top over there by that tree. I was picking and sifting through that discard pile, and I went down here. Started digging out here because I had a good luck last time. And sure enough, I'm pulling some stuff out. Got like your feldspars with your titanites on it. This one looks very promising. You can see it's a whole cluster of titanites, all kind of stacked on top of each other. Got this titanite crystal. Don't know how well formed it is. Now you got these interesting super stacked clusters of small feldspars, and then interspersed in them there's some titanites and stuff. Hoping this guy cleans up well and he's not too damaged, because look like it could be a nice piece. But yeah, I'm just basically sifting, loosening up with the pick of my geology hammer, and then using my hands to feel for the crystal faces and pull out the things that I think are crystals. It's not as efficient as sifting, but this stuff is too wet to use like a sifter, and I didn't bring one in the first place. My friend did, but he decided it was enough for him today. You can see the area he worked in. He sifted a lot, and he found a couple pieces. I think he found a couple nice small feldspar kind of thumbnails with some nice stacks of titanite on it. So I'm glad that he could find a couple pieces, because I did show him this spot. This is kind of my the spot I usually like going to when I visit Titanite Hill. But hopefully we can, because yeah, you can see there's more of that kind of stacked feldspar, and you can see there's these layers of leaves kind of showing, like that kind of shows me like what layer has been disturbed recently and what layer hasn't been disturbed since at least last year, right? Because the leaves would have come down in the fall time, and so you kind of get a good idea of like what's your freshly disturbed layers, what's your older layers, and like even though this has all been dug up by people, there's still lots of stuff that looks like a chunky bit of rictorite or something. Got my pile for other people who might want the stuff I dig up. Like I'm a firm believer, even if I don't want to take something, but I think other people might like it, I'll make a second pile. And you know, for those who do not want to put lots of effort in, because there's all different kinds of collectors. Some people collect very vigorously and put a lot of energy into collecting, and some people just want to relax and pick around and kind of just pick, as my friend says, henpeck around and just look for a couple specimens. And you know what? I'm happy to make their job easier if that's the kind of collecting they want to do. More power to them. It's not my cup of tea, but you know, it's all good. And we're just sifting, looking for those feldspars, because it seems like with the feldspar, there's a broken bit of apatite. I've never had good luck with apatite. I found one decent gemmy point the first year I was here, and a pretty sizable chunk with three of the faces of the length of the crystal, and that's about it for my my apatites. My apatite record here is not that great. Right now I'm just looking for like the crystal faces, feeling for the crystal faces, and you know, there's specific crystal faces. Like for the titanites, it's like a wedge shape, which actually my friend mentioned to me about that. Their titanites are actually known as sphenes, and sphene means wedge shape, which I did not realize. Here's a bit of a feldspar crystal. I'll throw that in the pile of who wants some free stuff. But you just use your hands, feel around. Some of this stuff seems to have been washed in here because of the springtime. So the cracks are catching all the stuff. Like this guy I found deep in there, but I want to kind of just there's a rock face here, or of the face of the vein on that side, and then there's this chunk here. So I want to go deeper into there, because I have a feeling that there will be more titanites, or more feldspar clusters with titanite clusters on them. So I'll get back to collecting. If I find anything interesting, I'll let you guys know. not even a couple minutes later, pulled out this, it's a bit roughed up, but it's looks like at least a large partial titanite crystal. You can see the shine and I can feel it. Titanite's quite dense. That's one of the ways you can kind of tell it from fluorictite, and titanite is also a bit more shinier. But then there's also, it seems like there's more titanites on this side, so it looks like it's kind of like a lumpy cluster. The back end is like super oxidized, which is interesting. I've never seen that with titanites from the Gibson Road Occurrence or Titanite Hill, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, there's big ones here. I found big ones before, not whole ones, but I knew there were big ones here, so that's quite cool. Hopefully it looks a lot better cleaned up, because really only you can see this part of the crystal face right now. But you can see that classic wedge shape, and like I said, it's quite heavy. And there's also some smaller wedges on the back. You can see that wedge there. But, you know, hopefully it looks better than this, because right now it looks quite ugly. I think it's time I call it quits. The bugs are pretty bad. Like, I'm pretty stubborn when it comes to bugs, but even I can admit right now they're pretty bad. I found more than enough cool things, so I'm pretty happy. I'm good to pack it up. I did decently well. Let's just get a view downhill. You can see how high we are up, and there's still ways more to go. Like, some people like to complain this spot is picked over, or it's too many people collect at it, but those people are just the kinds of collectors who don't want to put a lot of effort into finding a new spot. Obviously, this is not a new spot, but, you know, this is higher up, so there's, as you can see, a lot more interesting stuff up here still. But I think that's it for me today. Thank you guys for tagging along, and I'll try and show you guys some of the specimens cleaned up, some of the more interesting specimens cleaned up. But that is it for today. Actually, one quick side note. Me and my friend actually kind of had a discussion about this. Always make sure when you're going into a mineral collecting spot to take in what you took in, you take out. So if you bring garbage with you, please clean it up. It's very frustrating to see people leave garbage behind. I always try and take an extra bag so that I can throw the garbage in there if I do find them. I thought I'd show you guys some of my favorite specimens from this trip. They're partially cleaned, as you can see. I do not know where I put my iron out, so these guys have just gone through my ultrasonic cleaner to get the dirt off of them, but they still got kind of like that kind of oxidized layer, crusty oxidized layer that Titanite Hill is kind of known for with some of its specimens. But they're still cool to look at, so I am going to still show you guys because I think you'd still appreciate them. Starting on the left, you've got this, it's just a simple specimen of some tiny titanites, and then a really nice, well-formed, undamaged amphibole, kind of on a crude feldspar matrix. I just like the amphibole crystal. It's quite appealing and appeasing. It looks good to the eye, you know. Next, we got this lump of feldspar with an even more interesting lump of very shiny titanites. You can kind of see they're the weird, kind of more tabbier titanites where they're kind of flattened. I believe it happens when kind of two titanites are grown together and sandwiched. You can see this is just a kind of that massive titanite growth that you see where the crystals kind of grow together and they're kind of lumpier and less sharp. But man, they are lustrous titanites on this one. I can't wait for this specimen to be fully cleaned, because those titanites are gonna shine like they already are, but there's a bit of that crummy rust oxidization layer on them. Here is a large partial amphibole crystal, but this one's cool because it has a bunch of Titanites on it. You can see there's a bunch of Titanites all kind of sprinkled on top of it. There's even some grown in here. I think this one will do well. It will look even better once it's had a good soak in iron out. Here is just a pocket just full of Titanites. You can see all the Titanite wedges, and then on the other side, smaller Titanite wedges. This one also, same story. I believe it'll look a lot better once it's got a good soak in iron out. And also I plan on probably trimming off a decent part of the back end of this specimen because it's kind of dead weight. The interesting part is just in here, and just look at those. One of my friends, actually the friend I was with at Titanite Hill on this trip, mentioned that he what he called these kind of stacked Titanites. When you have it like this, he called them like horse teeth because they're like stacked in a row. And it kind of like, if they're all on the same level, it kind of does look like horse teeth, like, you know, the horse tooth look. But yeah, I'm quite excited to see these finally cleaned when I do have the time to clean them. But for now, I thought I'd just show you guys some of them as they're partially cleaned. Here's just like an individual amphibole crystal. It's just a nice squat amphibole crystal with a bit of damage here, but altogether nice, well formed for amphiboles go. Here's another feldspar cluster with some Titanites. You can see they're just lined up on each other. Man, it's so lustrous that the camera sometimes has problems focusing. And then on the back, there's even more Titanites. And I didn't even notice that when I first picked up this guy, because if I remember correctly, this guy was basically a lump of dirt with just the tips of these two Titanite, like this section of these two Titanites showing, and I just saw the high lustrous luster of the Titanites, which automatically gave me a hint that these were going to be quite interesting. Another amphibole, but this one has some Titanite plus a bit of apatite, which is kind of like, you know, a cool little trifecta mix: amphibole, Titanite, and some apatite. Here's an amphibole specimen. I have larger examples of this type of amphibole growth where you can see they kind of all grow stacked in each other. Like I describe it like a castle, like a gothic fantasy castle, where it's just all the crenellations and the extra off-hanging towers and stuff like that. But you can see they're all stacked on that. And then they do actually, this top part is the terminations of it. But this is just a small lump of amphiboles off of a larger lump. And I've got a couple larger examples that are just like whole clusters of that type of growth. Here's a really kind of massive, when I say massive, for those who don't know, it's not size generally, but it kind of refers to the generally, I would say, the quality of the crystal growth of a specimen. So kind of like the more lumpier, grown together crystal specimens, where like you have a bunch of crystal specimens where they're kind of formed and you can kind of see the vague shape of the crystal structure, but they're not really sharp and they're all kind of grown together and lumpy. Some collectors will call that like massive, I believe is the term. I hope I'm using that correctly, or at least that's how it's been explained to me by some collectors. But this is an example of that. It's a Titanite specimen, but it's just a bunch of lumpier, smaller Titanites that have grown together and kind of just wedged out. And so it does have that kind of Titanite wedge shape, but it's because it's a bunch of smaller Titanites that have grown together. But it's an interesting specimen nonetheless. Here we have a feldspar crystal, kind of a lumpy feldspar crystal with a well-formed amphibole. It's got a bit of the corner missing here, but I still feel like this would display well, something like this maybe. So, you know, the front end looks good, so I think it'll display well. It'll look nice in a cabinet, though it does need to take a bath and iron out for sure. Here's a smaller example of like the stacked amphiboles. Now, for those who don't know, when I say amphibole is a group of minerals, so it's like your richterites and stuff, or I guess people used to call this stuff also hornblende. That's like an older term for the same type of idea of mineral, where it's just a bunch of black minerals that fall kind of in the generally the same family group, but they look very similar. So unless you get them chemically tested, you're not going to know what they are. And so that's why I call these amphiboles, because there are various different types of amphiboles at the Gibson Road Occurrence. But I don't know I can't tell by just using my eye which ones they are. So I have to call them amphiboles because I don't know. It could be a richterite. It could be multiple different kinds of richterites. I've heard of people even finding fluororicterite at the Gibson Road Occurrence, like people having their amphibole specimens tested and coming back fluororicterite. But then there's also regular richterites and like all your different. So it's just all confusing, and so I don't know. So I just call them amphiboles. This is a small titanite cluster. You can see just stacks of titanites on top of each other, and that classic wedge shape. It's just a nice little cluster. Good. It's got good lustrousness, and it's even got a bit of that kind of toffee brown color, because with Titanite Hill, some of the titanites are kind of like this black metal gray color, and then some are more of a toffee brown color, and it just depends. It's in the same place you'll find both of them, but I don't know why there's a difference, but there is, which is interesting. And maybe it's just a secondary mineral, like the black lustrous kind of black gray metal lustrous color is more of is some type of other mineral, and then the lustrous coffee brown color, dark coffee brown color, is the actual titanite color. But I don't know. Please, if you do actually have an idea on this, or you know what I'm talking about, please do leave a comment below about that, because I'd be interested to learn about that, because I don't know why there are two kind of color variations. Here's probably the largest, most closest to being whole. There's a couple chips out of it. Titanite that I found on this trip. But you can see it's got that classic wedge shape, and as my friend mentioned to me, the original name for titanites is sphene, which is tied to, I believe, the word wedge, and I would assume Greek or maybe Latin. Usually that's where those words are derived from, either Greek or Latin usually. But yeah, it's a nice, lovely little titanite that'll definitely be part of my collection now. I'll definitely find a good spot. Last but definitely not least, I have this nice little thumbnail specimen, a double richterite crystal specimen with two double terminated richterite crystals with basically no damage. This little crystal has a tiny bit of damage, so I would say it's 99% there, and I would actually say this is probably my favorite specimen of this trip, is this richterite specimen, because I haven't found one like this yet, and it's almost whole, which from my experience the richterites can be quite brittle, and it's hard to find a nice whole one with very minimal damage. And ironically enough, I found this one right at the beginning. I met up with my friend, and he'd been digging in a hole, and I found some richterites, amphiboles and stuff, but I haven't found anything interesting. And we got to talking, and then I kind of looked down, and like below the discard pile, he had been throwing all the dirt he'd been sifting out, kind of washed out in a separate pile from a previous person, I assume, who'd been digging in the same area. I saw this cluster laying there. I'm like, oh, look, a nice little cluster, double crystal cluster of amphibole. And my friend is like, of course you would find that. Which is a bit funny. I swear I didn't poach it. It was like that when I found it. But I'm quite excited about this one. This one does also need a bit of time in iron out. You can kind of see this crusty, oxidized material on there. That stuff, people have asked me before, like, how do you clean that stuff up? And my experience is always soak it in iron out, in an iron out bath in your ultrasonic cleaner, and then run your ultrasonic cleaner a couple times. And what that will do is the first bit of soaking in the iron out will just rip off all of the like the surface oxidization. And then if there's any more stubborn oxidization there, I find the ultrasonic cleaning will kind of knock it loose or kind of open it up to be more easily attacked by the iron out. And so if you do that a couple times in a row on a couple stages, then what will happen eventually is that the rusty oxidized material will be kind of cleaned off of your crystals, and you'll have nice, cleaned, oxidization-free specimens. We have gotten to the end of this video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please do like and subscribe if you haven't already, and please in the comments below let me know what your favorite specimen is. And please do have a good day, and I'll see you guys in the next video.